If you're keen to make your practice more effective as I am, then this video I think is for you. It's focusing on what I call my fourth S, and that is simplify. Are you sitting comfortably? Then let's begin. Hi, this is Tommy with Tommy's Piano Corner, the place for returning pianists, or indeed anybody who loves piano, to share tips and ideas of how to get the best from this great hobby. If it's your first trip here, then please do think about subscribing. Simply hit the little icon in the bottom right hand corner of your screen now, and it's all done for you. If you're a regular viewer of the channel, you'll know that I've created a number of videos with ideas on how to practice, and many of these are things I've discovered or things I've worked out by combining different pieces of advice I've seen elsewhere when I'm working out how to practice things on piano. We often hear people talk about the 3 S's, and you'll know I've released videos on each one of these, and those are of course slowly, separately, and sections. However, one thing that's less often talked about is the option of simplifying things when we practice. The thing with the 3 S's is that each of them ultimately is a simplification strategy, isn't it? I mean, it's easier to play slowly than quickly, it's easier to play with one hand than with both. And the point of simplifying is that what we're actually doing is we're going to introduce some intermediate stages of difficulty into our practice that enable us to go from the current state that we are to be able to play the music, of course, ultimately as written. As a first example, let's think about Debussy's first Arabesque, and of course the famous bit that everybody finds the first technical difficulty perhaps, which is the famous 3/2 polyrhythm. When I was learning this piece initially, the first thing that occurred to me was that theoretically a 3/2 polyrhythm isn't that difficult to do. I mean, the first time I came across it was with my very first piano teacher when I was probably about 10 years old in Schubert's Serenade. And simply because you're only playing it once, i.e. there's just one occurrence of 3/2, it doesn't take that long to get it under your fingers, so it feels quite comfortable to do, and you're not overly stressed about it. The point with Debussy's Arabesque, of course, is that you need to do 4 groups of 3/2, which is infinitely more challenging to be able to do. I mean, if you think about it, we see this kind of effect in lots of other places. Take speed, for example. To be able to do a nice fast mordant in the grand pianistic scheme of things isn't overly challenging to be able to do. But to do a longer trill equally quickly, I'm sure all of us find more difficult. And fundamentally, the two are no different, are they? You're just alternating quickly between 2 different notes. However, with a trill, you're needing to do it a lot more times than you do with a simple mordant. So in this particular case, how could we simplify this problem? I mean, arguably, of course, yes, you can simply just do it much, much slower than it's written and work it out painstakingly in that way. Of course, you're likely to anyway do some hand-separate practice so that you're able to play each hand perfectly comfortably, but the hand-separate, of course, won't help you with the polyrhythm itself. So what then would we do? The approach that I found yielded the best results for me was to actually simplify the left hand. So play the right hand as written, but initially simplify the left hand by at first only doing the upward part of the arpeggio. Once I found that I was able to do this comfortably and without any worries about getting the polyrhythm right, I added an extra note to the left hand. So I did the first note of the descending part of the arpeggio. Again, practice this for a while, just keep looping through it until it becomes nice and comfortable, and then you can add another note in the left hand. And each time all you're doing is you're adding one note at a time to the left hand. So you're making the end-to-end thing gradually more complicated until finally you get to be able to practice the entire polyrhythm as written. And by this time, the problem of the polyrhythm has largely gone away. And of course, because of the way this first arabesque is written, if you wanted to, you could continue a similar idea as this section continues. So use just the upward part of the left hand, then the left hand upward plus a note, until you finally get to the entire left hand as written. Let's look at another example. If you watch my tutorial on Liszt's Romance, you'll see that I thought that perhaps the most tricky part there was the left hand in the middle section. I mean, whilst it's not particularly fast, it's in constant movement and there are quite a few position changes to accommodate. So in that tutorial video, I suggested one way of simplifying was to use block chords. And of course, you can use block chords with both hands together. But you can then take this even further. You could, for example, play just the upward part of the arpeggios as you're playing the right hand. As a next step, for example, you might then choose to alternate. So you'd use the entire left-hand pattern in one measure, and then just the upward part of it in the next measure, and then go back to the full pattern in the measure that follows, if you see what I mean. I'm sure you get the idea by now. What I'm basically trying to do is simply reduce the difficulty somewhat to start with, and then gradually give my left hand a little bit more to do, but in increments that it can manage with, rather than trying to practice the entire pattern as written from the get-go. The reason I prefer to do it this way rather than simply slowing it down is that ultimately the only part we're interested in is the right hand, isn't it? I mean, the left hand's just an accompaniment. The bit we really want to make sure is good is the right hand. And because the piano decays so quickly after you've pressed a note, when you slow something down a lot, you're not getting the same realistic practice of joining the two notes together, keeping the phrase in as you want it, and therefore I find it better to be able to practice more or less at the tempo I want to have it at the end, but clearly in a way where I'm not just fumbling and getting more wrong notes in my left hand than right ones. So if you'd like to try this technique out, then maybe have a look at my playlist on practice tips. You'll see most of these videos are basically the same kind of ideas. They're all simplification strategies. So the waltz in 4/4 time, the way I propose to deal with the second cadenza in Liszt Romance, the way I talked about the 32 note section in the Für Elise. These are all ultimately different variations of how you might go about simplifying something that means you're able to reliably practice it and gradually make it more complex until you're to the point that you can practice it exactly as written. Remember, ultimately, the aim of the game is that when we're practicing, we want to be repeating something in the way we want to repeat it without lots of bumps and crashes and wrong notes. And whilst we're doing this, these repetitions will help us to improve and therefore make our practice time much more effective. So if you're not already, then please do subscribe to Tommy's Piano Corner. Don't forget to click the little bell icon so you're notified of new videos as and when they're released. I thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you very soon.